how to stop suffering in silence. You know, one of the hardest things to admit is that you're hurting, that deep down there's a struggle, a weight, a pain that you carry alone. We live in a world where strength is measured by how much you can endure without flinching, without breaking, without letting anybody know. But let me tell you something, that kind of strength, it's not strength at all. It's a prison. And a lot of us are walking around with smiles on our faces while our hearts are screaming out for someone to just listen. But we hold it in, we bury it deep because we think that's what we're supposed to do. We suffer in silence because we don't want to be judged. We don't want to seem weak. We don't want anyone to know that behind all those achievements, behind that confidence, there's still a human being that feels. You ever look around and think how many people are carrying invisible wounds? How many folks are walking around with a smile plastered on their face while their minds are battling storms that nobody can see? We talk about physical health like it's everything, but mental health, that's the real battleground. And here's the truth, pain that's buried alive doesn't die. It just finds new ways to show up, whether it's through anxiety, through frustration, for feeling disconnected from the people you love. It's like a whisper in the back of your mind saying you're alone in this. But that's the biggest lie of all. You don't have to suffer in silence. You don't have to pretend that everything's okay when it's not. Because the real strength, the real power is in speaking up, in owning your truth, and saying, I'm not okay, and that's okay. And I know that's not easy. It takes courage to be vulnerable, to strip away that mask and let people see you for who you really are. But that's where healing starts. That's where transformation begins. Now listen, this is not just about talking for the sake of talking. It's about learning how to speak with confidence, how to let your truth come out without fear. Because when you find that voice, when you realize that your struggles don't make you weak, they make you real. Everything changes. And I promise you, by the end of this, you're going to understand why keeping it inside is the very thing that's been holding you back. Because if you're tired of suffering in silence, then it's time to break that cycle. It's time to unlock that voice inside of you that's been waiting to be heard. And there's something you're going to discover in this journey, something that's going to change the way you see yourself, the way you see your struggles. Stick with me because what's coming next is the kind of truth that can set you free. You know, I remember this story about a man who seemed to have it all. And from the outside, everything looked perfect. He had success, he had influence, people admired him. But behind closed doors, he was fighting battles that no one knew about. Anxiety, fear, loneliness, things that money and status couldn't touch. Every day he wore that mask, carried that weight in silence because he thought that's what strength was. He thought speaking up would make him look weak, make him seem less capable. But what he didn't realize, and what so many of us don't realize, is that true strength isn't about how much you can carry alone. It's about knowing when to ask for help. It's about recognizing that mental health is just as real, just as critical as anything physical. We've been trained to suffer in silence. We've been taught that our struggles are burdens that we should carry quietly. But I'm here to tell you that's a lie. Suffering in silence doesn't make you stronger. It just makes you suffer. And it's not just you. So many people around you are going through the same thing. They smile, they laugh, they go through the motions, but deep down, there's a storm that's raging. And I promise you, there is no shame in that. Think about it. If you broke your leg, you wouldn't just walk it off and pretend it's fine, right? You get it checked out, you'd ask for help, you do whatever it takes to heal. But when it comes to our minds, when it comes to that pain nobody can see, we act like it's different. We bottle it up, we hide it away, and we pretend like it's not there. But it is there. It's real. And if you don't deal with it, it doesn't go away. It just grows. It festers. It finds new ways to control your life. And let me tell you something, speaking with confidence about what you're going through is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. It takes courage to stand up and say, I'm not okay. It takes bravery to look someone in the eye and admit that you need help. But you know what? That's where real change happens. That's where real healing begins. Because when you speak up, you break the chains of silence. You stop suffering alone. You take that first step towards healing. I get it, it's not easy. We live in a world where vulnerability is sometimes seen as weakness. But I want you to think about the people you admire, the ones who seem to have it all together. I guarantee you, they've struggled too. They've faced demons, they've battled storms, but the difference is, they didn't do it alone. They found the strength to reach out, to speak up, to let somebody in. And sometimes the first step is just talking. One conversation, one moment of honesty, that's all it takes. You'd be surprised how many people understand exactly what you're going through. You'd be surprised how many people have been waiting for you to open up, to say the words that you've been holding back for so long. Because when you speak with confidence about your struggles, you're not just freeing yourself, you're giving others permission to do the same. I want you to think about that for a moment. Every time you choose to speak up, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping somebody else too. You're showing them that it's okay to be real, it's okay to admit when things aren't perfect, because nobody's perfect. We all have scars, we all have wounds that need healing. And sometimes the healing begins with just 3 words, I need help. If you're thinking, but I don't have anyone to talk to, I want you to understand that's not true. There are people who care, people who understand. And if you don't believe that yet, just stay with me because I'm going to show you exactly how to find that support, how to speak with confidence, how to open up in a way that feels right for you, because you don't have to carry this alone. Not anymore. You know, suffering in silence is like standing in a crowded room and screaming at the top of your lungs, but nobody hears you. It's like being trapped in a glass box, pounding on the walls, but the world just keeps moving. I want you to imagine what it would feel like to break that glass, to finally be heard, to finally be seen. That's what happens when you find your voice. That's what happens when you stop suffering in silence. There's power in speaking your truth. There's healing in letting it out. And I promise you, once you take that step, once you decide that you're done with silent suffering, you'll realize just how much strength you really have. The kind of strength that doesn't hide, the kind that doesn't mask pain with a smile. Real strength is standing up and saying, this is me. This is my truth, and I'm not ashamed. You know, one of the greatest misconceptions in life is that if you stay quiet, if you just endure, things will get better on their own. That somehow the pain will fade, the struggles will solve themselves. But the truth is, suffering in silence doesn't make you stronger, it just makes you lonelier. It isolates you from the very support that could lift you out of that darkness. And the hardest part, it convinces you that nobody would understand, that nobody would care, that opening up would somehow make things worse. But I'm here to tell you, that's a lie. Think about the strongest people you know, the ones who inspire you, the ones who seem unbreakable. I promise you, they didn't get there by holding everything inside. They got there by facing their struggles head on, by opening up, by letting people in. Because you can't heal what you refuse to confront. And the more you try to hide it, the more it grows. It's like a shadow that follows you everywhere. You can ignore it. You can pretend it's not there, but it's always lurking, always waiting to remind you of that pain. You know, when I look back at some of the toughest moments in my life, the ones that shook me to my core, I remember the temptation to keep it all inside, to just push through, to be strong, to act like everything was fine. But that's not strength, that's survival. There's a difference. Survival is just getting by, just making it through the day. But strength is facing it. Strength is finding your voice even when it shakes. Strength is looking somebody in the eye and saying, I'm hurting and I need help. And let me tell you, the moment you open up, the moment you choose to stop suffering in silence, you take back control. Because suffering in silence is like handing over the keys to your mind and letting pain ride. It decides where you go, how you feel, what you think. But when you speak up, when you share what you've been carrying, you take those keys back. You decide how you heal. You decide what direction your life goes. I know there's this fear of being judged, of being seen as weak or broken. But what if I told you that vulnerability is the purest form of strength? What if I told you that the very thing you're afraid to show is what could inspire somebody else to speak up to? That's how powerful your story is. That's how powerful your voice is. I remember hearing about this woman who spent years suffering in silence. She battled depression, anxiety, thoughts that she was too ashamed to share. To everyone around her, she seemed fine. She smiled, she worked hard, she did everything she was supposed to do. But inside, she was screaming. One day, she finally broke. She couldn't hold it in anymore, and she decided to share her story. And do you know what happened? Instead of judgment, she found support. Instead of isolation, she found community. And it didn't just change her life, it changed the lives of people around her who were also suffering in silence, waiting for someone else to speak up first. That's the power of breaking the silence. That's the power of mental health being spoken about with confidence. Because when you speak with confidence, when you own your truth, it sets you free. It sets others free. That mask you've been wearing, it starts to fade. That weight you've been carrying, it starts to lift. And for the first time in a long time, you breathe, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally. It's like finally coming up for air after being underwater for too long. And I know what you're thinking, but I've held it here for so long. I don't even know where to start. And that's okay. Starting is the hardest part, but it can be as simple as one conversation, one moment of truth. Maybe it's with a friend, maybe it's with family, maybe it's with someone you trust. But that first step, that's where healing begins. That's where suffering in silence ends. Because you deserve peace. You deserve to be heard. You deserve to stop carrying that weight alone. And if you think that nobody understands, I promise you somebody does. There are people out there who have walked through the same darkness, who have battled the same storms, and they made it out. And so can you. There's this quote I once heard, "You're only as sick as your secrets." The things you hold inside, the pain you refuse to share, it only grows stronger in the dark. But when you bring it into the light, when you speak with confidence, it loses its power. It stops defining you. And I know it's not easy. I know it takes courage. But what's the alternative? Continuing to suffer in silence, continuing to live with that weight on your shoulders. Imagine waking up one day without that burden. Imagine stepping into your life fully, not hiding, not pretending, but living with real freedom. That's what happens when you speak up. That's what happens when you find your voice. I want you to understand this. Suffering in silence doesn't have to be your story. It doesn't have to be your legacy. You have the power to change that. Right now, in this moment, it starts with a decision. It starts with understanding that speaking with confidence isn't just for other people, it's for you. It's your right. It's your path to healing. And I promise you, the journey to stop suffering in silence might be hard. It might be uncomfortable, but it is worth it. Because on the other side of that fear, on the other side of that silence is freedom. And freedom, that's where life really begins. You know, When I think about the journey to stop suffering in silence, I think about the chains that bind us. Not the physical kind, but the invisible ones, the ones that wrap around your mind, your heart, your soul. These chains are made of fear, of shame, of doubt. They're forged in moments when you told yourself, I can handle this alone, even when everything inside of you was screaming for help. And the longer you carry that weight, the heavier it gets. Until one day, you realize that you've been dragging those chains for so long. You don't even remember what it feels like to walk freely. I want you to think about that for a moment. How much energy have you spent pretending everything is fine? How many nights have you laid awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying thoughts you can't escape from? How many times have you put on a smile when inside you were breaking? This is what it means to suffer in silence. It's carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts, 1,000 hidden scars, and acting like it doesn't hurt. But it does. It always has. And the worst part, we convince ourselves that nobody would understand, that nobody would care, that maybe, just maybe, it's easier to keep it inside. But that's the lie. That's the prison. Because the truth is, the very thing you're afraid to say is the thing that could set you free. Speaking with confidence, owning your truth, saying out loud what you've buried deep for so long, that's how you break those chains. That's how you step out of that silence and into healing. Now, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you can just flip a switch and everything gets better. Healing is a process. It's a journey. But that journey begins with one step, one moment of courage, one decision to stop hiding, to stop pretending, and to let someone in. And I get it, there's fear of judgment, fear of being misunderstood, fear of looking weak. But let me ask you something, what's stronger? Pretending to be okay when you're not, or standing up and saying, I need help? The truth is, mental health is just as important as physical health. If you had a broken leg, you wouldn't just walk it off, would you? You wouldn't pretend it's not there, hoping it would heal on its own. But with our minds, with our hearts, we do exactly that. We bury the pain, we hide the wounds, and we suffer in silence. But silence doesn't heal. Silence only deepens the wound. I remember hearing about a man who spent years carrying his struggles alone. To the outside world, he was successful, confident, living the dream. But inside, he was falling apart. Anxiety, depression, thoughts he couldn't escape from, but he never told a soul. He didn't want to burden anyone, didn't want to seem weak. Until one day, it all came crashing down. He couldn't hide it anymore. And do you know what happened? When he finally spoke up, people listened. People cared. He found support in places he never imagined. His life didn't just get better, it transformed. Because he realized that speaking up wasn't a sign of weakness. It was the first step to strength. We need to change the narrative. We need to understand that speaking with confidence about your struggles isn't just brave, it's necessary. It's the bridge from suffering to healing. It's the path from darkness to light. It starts with breaking that silence. It starts with understanding that suffering in silence is a choice, and it's a choice you don't have to make anymore. I want you to think about the people in your life. How many of them are carrying hidden battles? How many are smiling on the outside, but screaming on the inside? We all know someone, maybe even more than one. And what if you speaking up gave them the courage to do the same? What if your story, your truth, was the very thing they needed to hear? Because here's the reality. When you speak up, you're not just helping yourself, you're helping everyone around you. You're breaking the chains for others too. You're giving them permission to be real, to be honest, to stop hiding. And that's powerful. That's how change happens. That's how communities heal. We weren't meant to carry our struggles alone. We weren't built to suffer in silence. That's why connection matters, why conversation matters, why reaching out matters. It's why speaking with confidence isn't just about you, it's about all of us. It's about building a world where nobody has to hide their pain, where nobody has to suffer alone. And if you're thinking, but I've been silent for so long, how do I even begin? I want you to understand something. It's never too late. It doesn't matter if you've been holding it in for months, years, even decades. The moment you decide to break the silence is the moment the healing begins. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying there won't be moments of doubt, moments of fear. But I am saying it's worth it. Your peace of mind, your happiness, your life, it's worth it. Because when you stop suffering in silence, you take back control. You take back your voice. You step out of the shadows and into the light. And you find something that you may have thought was impossible: freedom. Freedom from the weight, freedom from the isolation, freedom from the chains that have held you back for so long. And I promise you, when you finally step into that light, when you finally speak with confidence, you're going to wonder why you didn't do it sooner. You're going to feel lighter, stronger, more alive. And the people around you, they're going to see it too. Because when you heal, it ripples out. It touches everyone around you. It gives them permission to heal too. That's how you stop suffering in silence. That's how you reclaim your life. That's how you break the chains and step into the person you were always meant to be. Not hiding, not pretending, but living, truly living. When you decide to stop suffering in silence, something remarkable happens. It's like waking up from a long sleep. Suddenly, the world isn't as heavy, the days aren't as gray. You start to feel things again: hope, joy, even just the simple peace of knowing you're not carrying that weight alone anymore. But the journey doesn't stop there. In fact, that's just the beginning. You see, when you choose to break that silence, you're not just choosing to heal, you're choosing to grow. You're choosing to transform that pain into power, that silence into strength. And the beauty of it, you're not just doing it for you. The moment you find your voice, you light the way for others to find theirs too. Because pain shared is pain lessened. And when you speak up, you're telling others it's okay. You don't have to do this alone. I want you to imagine for a second. What if everyone who was suffering in silence found the courage to speak up? What kind of world would that be? A world where mental health isn't a secret, where suffering isn't hidden behind fake smiles and quiet desperation. A world where we don't just survive, we thrive. Where people understand that speaking with confidence about their struggles is a sign of strength, not weakness. I've seen it happen. I've seen people who spent their entire lives bottling up their pain finally decide to share it. And it didn't just change their lives, it changed the lives of everyone around them. Families started talking, friendships got deeper, communities grew stronger. Because vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's a bridge. It's how we connect. It's how we understand each other. You know, there was this story I heard once about a man who had carried his struggles in silence for years. Depression, anxiety, the kind of battles that no one sees but that weigh heavier than anything physical. He kept it all inside, thinking it would make him stronger, thinking it was his burden to bear alone. But it wore him down. Day by day, it chipped away at his spirit until one day he couldn't take it anymore. He broke down and finally told his family. He expected judgment. He expected disappointment. But what he got was love. What he got was understanding. And that's what I want you to understand. People are stronger than you think. They can handle your truth. More than that, they want to handle it. They want to be there for you. But they can't help you if you don't let them in. They can't support you if you don't speak up. We live in a world where we've been taught to wear masks, to show only the best parts of ourselves and hide the rest. But what if the parts you're hiding are the parts that could bring you closer to others? What if sharing your struggle is what finally allows you to breathe, to live, to be free? because suffering in silence, that's the real prison. It locks you away from connection, from understanding, from the kind of love and support that can lift you out of that darkness. I want you to think about something. Every time you keep your pain to yourself, you're reinforcing the idea that it's not okay to struggle. You're telling yourself that your feelings don't matter, that your voice doesn't deserve to be heard. But that's not true. Your voice matters. Your feelings matter. And there are people out there right now who want to listen, who want to help you carry that load. It's time to let go of the fear of judgment, the fear of looking weak, the fear of being misunderstood. Because strength isn't about enduring pain alone. Strength is about facing that pain head on, acknowledging it, speaking about it with confidence, and finding the courage to seek help. And when you do that, you're not just healing setting an example. You're showing others that it's okay to be human, it's okay to struggle, and it's okay to speak up. And when you start speaking up, you realize something powerful. You're not alone. You never were. There are millions of people out there going through the same battles, facing the same storms. And when you share your story, you give them hope. You show them that it's possible to overcome, to heal, to rise above. Imagine the ripple effect of that. One person speaks up, then another, then another. Communities start talking, families open up, friends become pillars of support instead of just spectators. That's how we change the narrative. That's how we create a world where nobody has to suffer in silence. And maybe right now you're thinking, I don't even know where to start. But the truth is, it starts with just one step, one conversation, one moment of truth where you decide that your mental health matters, that your voice matters. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to fix everything overnight, but you do have to take that first step. Because if you don't, the suffering continues, the silence continues, and that weight, it doesn't go away, it just gets heavier. But when you speak with confidence, when you share your struggle, that weight starts to lift. And not just for you, for everyone who hears you. That's what I need you to understand. You have the power to not only heal yourself, but to heal others. Your story, your voice, your willingness to step out of the silence that can change lives. That can save lives. And I want you to think about the legacy you want to leave behind. Do you want it to be one of quiet suffering, hidden behind forced smiles and lonely nights? Or do you want it to be one of courage, of strength, of breaking the chains that held you back? Because that's what happens when you stop suffering in silence. You break those chains. You set yourself free, and in that freedom, you find something that's been missing for too long: peace of mind, peace of heart, peace of spirit. That's what happens when you speak with confidence. That's what happens when you let people in. That's what happens when you decide that your mental health matters, that you matter. Here's the thing: suffering in silence is a cycle, a pattern that can feel impossible to break. You get so used to carrying that weight, so used to hiding behind the mask, that it starts to feel normal. But deep down, you know it's not. Deep down, you feel that pull, that urge to finally let it out, to finally breathe. And I want you to understand, it's not just about speaking up, it's about liberation. It's about finally stepping out of the shadows and standing in the light of your truth. It's about reclaiming your voice, your power, and your peace. Because when you stop suffering in silence, you stop merely existing and you start living. But I get it, sometimes the silence feels safer. Sometimes the fear of being misunderstood, of being judged, keeps you locked away in that mental prison. But here's the truth: staying silent doesn't protect you. It only deepens the wound. It only strengthens the chains. And the longer you hold it in, the tighter those chains get. Until one day, you can't move. You can't breathe. I'm telling you this because I've seen it. I've seen people who carried their pain alone for years. They wore their smiles like armor, laughed at the right times, nodded through conversations, but inside, they were fighting battles nobody knew about. And the saddest part, they thought they had to do it alone. They thought that silence was strength, that hiding their struggles made them stronger. But real strength isn't about carrying the load alone. Real strength is about knowing when to reach out, when to say, I need help. You are not weak for wanting support. You are not fragile for needing someone to listen. You are human, and being human means you feel. It means you hurt, and it means sometimes you need someone to help carry that weight. That's not weakness, that's courage. That's strength. When you finally decide to speak up, when you finally choose to stop suffering in silence, you don't just change your life, you change the lives of everyone around you. Your courage inspires others. Your honesty gives others permission to be honest too. It's like a ripple effect. One person opens up, and suddenly, others feel safe to do the same. That's how healing spreads. That's how communities grow stronger. I think about the people who chose to step out of that silence. People who, for years, kept their struggles buried deep. But the moment they spoke up, the moment they shared their truth, something incredible happened. They found support. They found love. And most importantly, they found peace. Because when you finally stop hiding, you start healing. And I want you to hear me when I say this. You don't have to wait for rock bottom to break the silence. You don't have to wait until the weight is too much to bear. You can choose right now to step into the light. You can choose to share your truth, to speak with confidence, to stop suffering in silence. I know it's not easy. I know the fear is real. But what's on the other side of that fear is worth it. On the other side is freedom. On the other side is connection. On the other side is the realization that you were never alone to begin with. Because the moment you open up, you start to see the hands that were reaching out for you all along. The people who wanted to support you, who wanted to love you, but cowered because you never let them in. And listen, it doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the right words. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to start. Maybe it's a conversation with a friend. Maybe it's writing it down. Maybe it's seeking professional help. But whatever it is, the important thing is that you begin. Because once you take that first step, the walls start to crumble. The chains start to break. And suddenly, you're not just surviving, you're living. I want you to think about the impact you could have, the people you could inspire just by speaking up, the lives you could touch simply by choosing not to suffer in silence. Because when you choose to be vulnerable, you give others the permission to do the same. You give them the strength to say, if they can do it, maybe I can too. That's the power of your story. That's the power of your voice. And when you use it, you don't just set yourself free, you set others free too. This is your moment. This is your chance to break the cycle, to stop carrying that weight alone, to finally breathe again. And I promise you, when you make that choice, you're going to feel something you may not have felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that things can get better. Hope that you're not alone. Hope that the chains that have held you back for so long can finally be broken. So right here, right now, I want you to make a decision. I want you to decide that you're done suffering in silence. I want you to decide that your mental health matters, that your voice matters, and that it's time to speak with confidence, not just for yourself, but for everyone who needs to hear your story. Because when you speak, you heal. When you speak, you inspire. And when you speak, you change the world one voice at a time. We are Wisdom Recorder, your knowledge source. If this message touched you, if you felt that shift inside, and join us. Subscribe, like, and become part of this journey, because healing isn't meant to be done alone. We're here with you every step of the way.